Listen to me. You thought they didn't care. You thought they didn't love you. Why? Because they weren't touchy-feely. They weren't blowing up your phone. They weren't spilling their heart out on Instagram captions. So you said, they don't love me. You said, they're cold. You said, I'm wasting my time. But you were looking at love through your lens. See, just because someone loves different doesn't mean they love less. Avoidants, they're not broken. They're not heartless. They're protecting something. And you might be the first person in their life who's even gotten close to that guarded heart. You don't know what they had to survive to build that distance. You don't know how many times they cried behind closed doors and said, I will never let anybody have that kind of power over me again. So yeah, they pull back. They don't chase. They pause. They need space, but you're not seeing what's really happening. You wanted words, they gave you consistency. You wanted passion, they gave you presence. You wanted fireworks, they gave you a slow burn that never goes out. You wanted them to change overnight, but you didn't see the little things. That text they sent, even though it killed their pride. That moment they opened up, even though it terrified them. That time they showed up, even when their instincts screamed, run. Listen, love doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in actions. Sometimes it shows up in the struggle to stay. And when someone avoidant loves you, really loves you, they won't always say it with flowery words, but they'll say it by fighting the battle within just to stay close to you. They'll say it by doing what's unnatural for them, not because it's easy, but because you're worth the risk. So don't you dare walk away just because they didn't show up how you expected. Pay attention to how they show up in their language. Because let me tell you something, just because someone is afraid to be vulnerable doesn't mean they don't feel. They feel deep, deeper than most, but feeling deep in silence, that's torment. That's love trapped in a cage. And if they're fighting to open that cage, even just a crack, that's proof. Proof they care, proof they're trying, proof that love lives in places we don't always understand. So next time you think they don't love you, ask yourself, are they showing up even if clumsily? Are they trying even if it's slow? Are they staying even when they're scared? Because if they are, then you already got your proof they love you. Now love them with patience. You thought they didn't care because you were looking through your own lens. You were measuring their love based on your standards, your experiences, your emotional language. And when they didn't speak it the way you wanted, you thought something was broken. But love doesn't come with one face. Love doesn't show up with the same expression for every single person. The biggest mistake we make is thinking everyone loves the same way, that they feel the same, react the same, need the same. That's where the confusion starts. When someone doesn't say, I love you the way you're used to hearing it, you assume the feeling isn't there. When someone doesn't run towards you in the way you expect, you think they're pulling away. But maybe they're loving you in the only way they know how. Maybe they're speaking a language you haven't learned yet. And if you judge them before learning that language, you'll miss the entire message. See, some people grow up in environments where affection isn't free, where love is conditional, where being vulnerable was punished. So when they finally feel something real, something deep, it doesn't explode out of them. It scares them. It doesn't come out smooth or poetic. It comes out guarded. It comes out quiet. It comes out nervous, but it still comes out. You want them to say it like you do, to touch like you do, to share like you do. But if they've never been taught that kind of expression, how can they give it? If every time they opened up before someone shut them down, how can they know it's safe with you now? They don't speak the language of love the way you do, but that doesn't mean they don't feel it. That doesn't mean it's not burning inside of them. You got to stop assuming your way is the only way. That just because they're not gushing doesn't mean they're not caring. That just because they're not chasing doesn't mean they're not choosing. Some people show love by doing things for you, by staying near, by simply being present. Some people show it by not walking away, even when every part of them is screaming to run, because that's what they've always done. You've been looking at them like they're doing it wrong, but maybe, just maybe, they're doing it in a way that's hardest for them. And that right there, that's love. Love is when you do what's hard for someone else's comfort. When you go against your wiring because someone finally made it worth rewiring. That's what you're missing. Your lens says love should be loud, but their lens says love is sacred and scary. Your lens says it should be quick. Theirs says it takes time to trust. Your lens says closeness should be constant. Theirs says closeness has always meant danger. You see the difference? You're not wrong for needing love the way you do, but they're not wrong either. They just come from a different kind of battlefield. And the thing about battlefields, they leave scars. Some you can see and some you can't. Some people show up with open arms, others show up with armor. But if they're still standing in front of you, armor and all, it means something. It means despite the fear, despite the programming, despite the instinct to shut down, they're still here. That's the thing we overlook. We romanticize ease. We glorify emotional expression. But we forget that for some people, staying is the loudest I love you they can give. That choosing not to run is a confession. That opening up even an inch for them is like opening a floodgate. You may be asking for a river, but they're fighting to give you a drop. And that drop, that's everything they've got right now. You just can't see it because your lens is filtering the whole story. Your lens is saying, they don't love me the way I need. But maybe the real question is, are they loving me in the way they're capable of right now? And if they're trying, stretching, stumbling forward, then that's real. It's raw, it's imperfect, but it's real. Love doesn't always arrive dressed how you imagine. Sometimes it shows up wearing fear. Sometimes it walks in wearing silence. But if it still shows up, don't you dare overlook it. Don't let your limbs blind you to their truth. Because when you take off the filter and see them for who they are, not who you want them to be, you'll realize love was there all along. You just didn't recognize its face. You're looking for words, for grand gestures, for open declarations. You're expecting love to be loud, expressive, clear. You want them to say, I love you in the way you've seen in movies, in the way you read in books. But when you're dealing with someone who leans avoidant, that's not how it comes out. That's not how they show it. For them, love isn't in the words, it's in the effort. It's in the consistency. It's in the decision to stay when everything in them is wired to flee. They don't say, I love you with a dozen roses and a love letter. They say it by answering your text when they want to disappear. They say it by sitting next to you when their instinct is to shut down. They say it through action, through presence, through small steps that take every ounce of courage they have. See, it takes almost nothing to say the right thing. Anyone can memorize lines. Anyone can send cute messages, but showing up consistently, being there without needing praise for it, that's where the weight is. Avoidants don't throw words around lightly. In fact, they might barely say anything at all. But when they do something for you, especially something that stretches their comfort zone, it's a message louder than anything they could ever say. You might be focused on what they're not doing. You're stuck on what's missing. You're focused on what you're used to from people who wore their hearts on their sleeves. And because this person doesn't follow that script, you're tempted to believe they're not invested. But you're missing the truth. Someone avoidant doesn't move unless it matters. They don't open the door to their world unless they believe you're worth the risk. Their actions aren't loud, but they're intentional. Their movements aren't fast, but they're real. When they make space for you, that is the love. You want constant communication, daily check-ins, deep conversations, but for them, just replying, even when they're emotionally drained, takes everything. Just showing up after a day of internal struggle is a massive gesture. Just letting you in when everything in them screams for isolation is a revolution. And they're not doing it for everyone. They're not handing out this effort to just anybody. If they're doing it for you, it means you matter more than their fear, more than their patterns, more than their safety zone. You have to look closer. You have to read between the lines. The effort is there, but it's not always packaged in the way you expect. It might look like them asking how your day was. It might look like them inviting you to sit with them in silence. It might look like them telling you about their past in a brief, uncomfortable sentence. These things may seem small to you, but to them, that's vulnerability. That's exposure. That's love in motion. Avoidants are masters of control. They control their environment, their emotions, their connections, because when you grow up in a world where connection equals danger, you learn to survive by limiting it. So when they start to offer you little pieces of themselves, they're not just showing love, they're handing you power. Power to hurt them, power to see them, power to reach them where no one else has. And that doesn't happen without love. They may not be the person who grabs your hand in public or says, "I miss you" out loud, but they're the person who checks in with you, who notices when your mood shifts, who changes a habit because you express discomfort. They're the person who watches the movie you like, even if they don't get it, who remembers that story you told them once in passing and brings it up 6 months later. That's not an accident. That's not a coincidence. That's emotional investment at work. The truth is, avoidants love deeply, but they love differently. Their love isn't loud. It isn't showy. It doesn't always come dressed in the emotional language you understand, but it's there. It's steady. It's careful. It's cautious, not because they don't care, but because they care so much it terrifies them. So instead of diving in with words, they build the relationship slowly through actions. They prove it over time. And while the world praises passionate declarations and dramatic gestures, avoidants are busy doing the work in the background. They're proving their love by changing behaviors, not just changing moods. They're showing their love by staying in the room, even when it's hard, by not walking out when that's the only thing that's ever felt safe before. Silence is not the absence of feeling. Just because someone doesn't speak their emotions doesn't mean they aren't swimming in them. In fact, for some people, silence is where the deepest emotions live. It's where the truth hides, where the fears echo, where love battles against the instinct to run. So instead of diving in with words, they build the relationship slowly through actions. They prove it over time. And while the world praises passionate declarations and dramatic gestures, avoidants are busy doing the work in the background. They're proving their love by changing behaviors, not just changing moods. They're showing their love by staying in the room, even when it's hard, by not walking out when that's the only thing that's ever felt safe before. Silence is not the absence of feeling. Just because someone doesn't speak their emotions doesn't mean they aren't swimming in them. In fact, for some people, silence is where the deepest emotions live. It's where the truth hides, where the fears echo, where love battles against the instinct to run. This silence isn't empty. It's full of thoughts they don't know how to say, full of fears they can't even name, full of emotions they feel too deeply to express without unraveling. You think they don't care because they're quiet, but that quiet is exactly where their feelings live. Every time they pause before responding, every time they sit with you and don't speak, every time they choose not to say what they're thinking, it's not because they feel nothing, it's because they feel too much. So much that it overwhelms them, so much that they don't trust it won't consume them if they let it out. You've been trained to look for love in obvious places. You've been taught that love should be loud and expressive and clear, but not everyone learned love that way. Not everyone was allowed to express freely. Some people learned early that showing emotion meant weakness, that crying meant punishment, that needing others meant being let down. So they adapted, they survived by shutting down the visible signs of what they were going through. They stopped crying, They stopped talking, but they didn't stop feeling. Inside, it's a war zone. There's longing, there's care, there's desire for closeness, but there's also fear, fear of being hurt, fear of being rejected, fear of not being enough. So they go quiet, they go still, not because they're absent, but because they're overwhelmed by presence, your presence, the presence of connection, the presence of something that matters too much to handle lightly. You ask why they don't just say how they feel, why they can't be honest. But honesty is hard when the truth is too raw to touch. When the truth exposes wounds they've spent years covering. You think they hiding something from you, but they really hiding something from themselves. Because to say I love you means admitting they need someone. And needing someone is the most dangerous thing they've ever known. But even in silence, love speaks. It speaks in the way they look at you when they think you're not paying attention. It speaks in the way they remember the smallest details about you. It speaks in the effort they put in, even when it's awkward or uncomfortable. It speaks in the way they pull back, not because they're done, but because they're scared of going further than they ever have. That withdrawal, that quiet distance, it's not rejection. It's fear disguised as indifference. The mistake people make is assuming silence equals detachment. That if someone really loved you, they'd show you. They'd prove it the way you want it proven. But for avoidance, love isn't a performance. It's a process, a silent, internal journey from fear to trust, from self-protection to connection. Every small gesture, every time they let you see behind the wall, every moment they allow you closer, that's love. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. Their silence doesn't mean the absence of emotion. It means the emotion is so big, so unfamiliar, so intimate that they don't yet have the words for it. So they stay silent, not because they don't feel, but because they feel more than they've ever let themselves before. And feeling that much, caring that deeply, is terrifying for someone who's only ever found safety in distance. Effort and discomfort is proof of love. When someone avoidant begins to stretch themselves beyond what feels natural, when they push against their instincts and fears just to stay close, that's love showing up in its rawest form. You may not see it right away because it doesn't come with flowers or dramatic gestures. It's not love that shouts. It's love that shakes. Love that breaks patterns and pushes through resistance. Avoidants aren't wired for closeness. They're not built for vulnerability. But when they choose discomfort, when they willingly lean into the very things they've spent their life avoiding, they're telling you without saying a word that you matter more than their fear. See, there are people who can love easily. People who grew up safe to express, safe to attach, safe to depend. They run toward intimacy because that's what they've always known. But then there are others who learn to survive by retreating, by depending only on themselves, by turning inward every time the world turned cold. For them, love doesn't come with ease. It comes with risk. And when they make the effort to show up, when they reach out, even if clumsily, it's not a small thing. It's everything. It's easy to love when it's comfortable, easy to say the right thing when you're confident you won't be rejected, easy to stay when closeness feels safe. But for the avoidant, none of that is easy. Every move toward connection feels like walking into fire. Every attempt to stay present feels like resisting gravity. So when they do it anyway, that's not just effort, it's transformation. It's choosing to rewrite their internal script. It's choosing to trust when their whole nervous system is telling them to run. That kind of effort, that's not casual. That's not surface level. That's deep love in motion. You might be looking at them and thinking, why are they so distant? But what you're not seeing is the battle going on inside. They're fighting themselves every step of the way. They're questioning whether they're worthy of love, whether they're capable of giving it. They're analyzing everything, trying to protect both you and themselves from the pain they fear is inevitable. And still, they're here, still They haven't walked away. Still, they're trying, even when it feels like a foreign language. Love from an avoidant is not smooth, it's not polished, it's messy, it's uncomfortable, it's slow. But when they put in the effort to stay in that discomfort, when they choose to sit in the awkwardness instead of escaping it, that's love in its most courageous form. They're not doing what's easy, they're doing what's hard. And that's what makes it real. Think about how often they might be triggered. Think about how many times they've probably told themselves it's safer to be alone, and yet they're still calling, still texting, still trying to make this thing work. That's not laziness, that's resilience. That's someone showing up scared, but still showing up. You can't measure their love by what feels easy to you. You have to measure it by how hard it is for them to do what they're doing. When they open up to you, even just a little, that's not casual conversation, that's emotional labor. When they admit they miss you, when they say they care, that's not just talk, that's breakthrough. That's them stepping into a place that terrifies them just to let you in. They're not just saying words, they're doing emotional heavy lifting. And they're doing it for you. People think love should feel good all the time, but real love, the kind that requires growth, doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like fear. Sometimes it feels like confusion. Sometimes it feels like two people stumbling through the dark, trying to find each other. And when one of those people is avoidant, that stumbling, that hesitation, that pause before speaking, it all comes from the weight of what they're carrying inside. So when you see them leaning in instead of pulling away, understand what that means. That's them overriding years of conditioning. That's them choosing you over comfort. That's them proving their love, not with ease, but with effort. And that effort, in the face of discomfort, in the face of their own wiring, is more meaningful than words will ever be. Patience reveals the depth of true connection. When you're dealing with someone who doesn't move fast, someone who takes time to open up, someone who questions closeness every step of the way, your ability to wait, to remain present without demanding, is what shows them that love doesn't have to come with pressure. That's where the real connection gets built, not in the urgency to be understood, but in the willingness to because when someone is wired to retreat, to guard themselves from vulnerability, the only way they'll ever step forward is if they know they have space to do it at their own pace. And that space is created by patience. You can't rush someone out of fear. You can't demand openness from someone who spent their whole life believing that opening up leads to pain. And the more you push, the more they pull away. Not because they don't care, but because care for them is complicated. It's layered. It's filled with memories of times they tried and got burned, times they trusted and were let down. So if you're looking for instant connection, if you want everything all at once, you're going to miss what's real. Because for the avoidant, connection that lasts isn't made in the fast moments. It's made in the moments you don't walk away just because it's slow. Patience is not passive. It's powerful. It's not about sitting around waiting for someone to change. It's about actively choosing to understand where they're coming from. It's about showing them day by day that love doesn't have to be rushed to be real, that presence doesn't have to be loud to be felt, that you don't need fireworks to know something meaningful is growing. You just need time and consistency and a willingness to stay steady even when it feels uncertain. When someone avoids connection, when they hesitate to trust, it's not because they don't want love. It's because they're terrified of what love might cost them. They've seen how quickly things fall apart. They felt the sting of being misunderstood. And sometimes they're not even sure they deserve to be loved in the first place. So they test it. They pull away to see if you'll follow. They go quiet to see if you'll stay. They shut down to see if you'll still choose them even when it's hard. Not because they want to hurt you, but because they need to know this love can survive the parts of them they've always had to hide. Patience becomes the proof. It becomes the mirror that reflects something different than what they're used to. Where the world once says, hurry up or I'm gone, patience says, I'm still here. Where others once demanded explanations, patience says, I'll listen when you're ready to speak. Where others walked away when things got quiet, patience waits not for perfection, but for honesty. And when they see that, something shifts. The wall doesn't fall all at once, but a brick comes loose, then another. And slowly the person behind the armor starts to show up, not because they're forced, but because they feel safe. Every time you stay when they expect you to leave, every time you give space instead of pushing for answers, you're showing them a different kind of love, of healing kind, a steady kind, the kind they've never trusted before, but have always needed. And yes, it takes time, sometimes more time than you think you have. But if the connection is real, if the foundation is strong, then the wait becomes part of the story, not a delay, but a building process, one where both people grow, not just toward each other, but as individuals who are learning what love really looks like. Because the truth is, connection without patience is just infatuation. It's surface, it's flash. But connection with patience, that's the kind that roots deep. That's the kind that weathers storms. That's the kind that says, I see you, not just the parts that are easy, but the parts that are guarded, scared, unsure, and I'm not going anywhere. That's where the breakthrough happens. That's when someone who's always felt too much starts to believe that maybe, just maybe, they're not too much after all. You don't need to fix them. You don't need to change them. You just need to hold space long enough for them to step into it. Patience isn't about waiting forever. It's about understanding timing, their rhythm. And when they finally meet you there, when they start to move towards you, it won't be because they were pushed. It'll be because they chose it. And that kind of choice means everything.